I can rem I can remember 2-year-old Jeffrey, but for some reason I'm just not. I don't. For whatever, I didn't have maybe a lot of drama going on when I was, when I was 8, like I did. I remember my grandfather, who died when I was 2.5. I have like 3 memories with him when I was 2 years old. One of them is he's putting cowboy boots on me, and we're driving in his truck, his old pickup truck down this dirt road, and he was pretending that the truck was a stagecoach. And it was all these potholes in this dirt road, and whenever he hit a pothole, he would slap the dashboard and he'd go, "Hiya!" And the truck would jump forward, and I felt like I was being pulled by horses down this road, and I was laughing so hard. I still have this memory of I can't stop laughing.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you are here. You are going to be so happy that you are here. I love using that word happy because that's what we're going to be talking about today. A lot is about happiness and how to have it. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I get to do so many fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do is meet people. And I get to meet some extraordinary people. And today I have not one incredible guest, but two, Mike and Jeffrey, who are going to blow your socks off. You're going to want to listen to what they have to say. I guarantee that by the end of this episode, you're going to want to send it to friends. You're going to want to send it to family. You're going to have a smile on your face. You're going to be a happier person overall. So let's go at it. Mike and Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So good to be on the show with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy that you're here. And as I said when we were off air, I love it when people get to know you. So I'm going to give you each the floor with this question. I want to hear about 8-year-old Mike and 8-year-old Jeffrey.
Do you remember that far back, Jeffrey? I
I don't know,
do.
every year I feel like it's the 8-year-old Jeffrey gets further and further in the distance. I don't know if you want to go first, or if you want me to go first.
Jump in there, Jeffrey.
Yeah. So I think, the 8-year-old version of myself. I think I have like there were some pivotal moments in my childhood, and something happened between 5-year-old Jeffrey and 8-year-old Jeffrey. And my memories with 8-year-old Jeffrey are probably not as clear as the 5-year-old for some reason. And then here's what's really bizarre, Kim. I can rem I can remember 2-year-old Jeffrey, but for some reason I'm just not. I don't. For whatever, I didn't have maybe a lot of drama going on when I was, when I was 8, like I did. I remember my grandfather, who died when I was 2.5. I have like 3 memories with him when I was 2 years old. One of them is he's putting cowboy boots on me, and we're driving in his truck, his old pickup truck down this dirt road, and he was pretending that the truck was a stagecoach. And it was all these potholes in this dirt road, and whenever he hit a pothole, he would slap the dashboard and he'd go, "Hiya!" And the truck would jump forward, and I felt like I was being pulled by horses down this road, and I was laughing so hard. I still have this memory of I can't stop laughing. And I still have the cowboy boots, by the way. We kept them, and we've got them somewhere in some storage some storage place. But so I have that memory. And then when I was 5 years old, I just have a memory of moving from California to Idaho. We moved to Idaho for like a year or two, and that whole process of moving and the excitement. And I had this big dog that was in the truck with me the whole way, and so I have a memory about that. And I would say probably, those are maybe the 2 most vivid memories that I have from my childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of a kid were you? Were you adventurous? Like, were you the play outside, go
Well, I was a bit of a
paddle
prankster.
or something?
I
Yeah.
was a bit of a prankster, and You know, the family tells all these stories about all the pranks that I would pull as a kid. You know, we had horses. We lived out in the country, and um, I a couple of times my sister would be on the horse, and I would shoot the horse in the flank with a little BB gun, one of those little Daisy BB guns, to see if the horse would buck. I did get in quite a bit of trouble for doing that. So, yeah. So, you know, as a kid, I loved pulling pranks. I loved laughing, and I got into my fair share of trouble as a kid. Man, like I'm reliving some of this right now.
All right, Mike, you're up to bat. See if you
Well,
can beat
8-year-old Mike was my parents were raised in Ohio. I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and my dad came from a good, stable home. My mother came from divorced parents, military family, lots of moving, lots of trauma, lots of schools. She was the eldest. Her siblings kind of became her children while her mother worked, and mom had not had an easy life. So they had a great, her and dad had a great marriage, and they became Christians when I was 2 years old. They had not been church going people and had a hunger in their life. So they they went to church, and then just 3 years later, our little church in Ohio sent us to Flagstaff, Arizona, to teach and preach among the Navajo and Hopi tribal people. And so at 8 years old, I was in elementary school in Flagstaff. I was loving the life, mountains, snow, wildlife, canyons, hiking. I loved everything about those years. I hadn't discovered yet at 8 years old a lot of things about life, about its difficulties, its traumas. I had a good life at 8. We moved to Houston, Texas when I was 14, and I learned really quickly about a different kind of world. When I was in Flagstaff, it was a small mountain town, pure as the driven snow. I didn't know much about the troubles of the world. When we moved to Houston for my dad to teach in a Bible college, it was not a good part of town. My school was, by now I was junior high, lots of gang activity and violence and hatred and division and distractions, and it was really traumatizing to me at 14. But as I grew, Kim, and we'll learn in this as we unfold this, why this book on happiness is so important to me. Because my father, both of my parents are passed, but when my father was here, he was to the last day of his life, an optimistic, upbeat, happy-go-lucky guy that was friends with everybody and never had a down day. But he spent a lot of time, and I just have to be honest with this. You know, my mother had a lot of trauma in her life as a child growing up, and Dad spent a lot of his energy pumping mom up, keeping her happy. I see all this as an adult now. I didn't know what all was going on. You know, mom would disappear in the bedroom for 2 or 3 days, and they said it was a migraine. And I think she dealt with some real depression and probably postpartum. I mean, we moved to Flagstaff when my little sister was a month old. So mom left her family, her city, her background, everything familiar. It was difficult. I'm a lot like my mother, though. I'm not naturally as outgoing and gregarious and happy go lucky as my dad was. My mother was contemplative, very smart, intelligent woman, but hadn't known a lot of life's happiness and struggled with some of that. So as I grew up, I was close to mom. Dad was always an encourager, but there were no deep conversations. Mom, you could have deep conversations, and she was inspiring to me intellectually, but not so much emotionally. Her family were Germans. They were not touchy-feely people. Um I would have to struggle. And listen, I don't have any stories of abuse, but I'm just telling you, I would have struggled. You know, both of them were the World War II generation, and they were both from first generation immigrants from Scotland on my dad's side and from Germany on my mother's side. they were not huggy people. I would have to struggle to remember hugs or shows of emotion in that way. Providers, absolutely, but there was a lot left to be desired with the embraces and the kisses and the "you're doing great." That was not in abundance. So it sounds funny to say it was a little bit cold, but maybe it was. So as I grew up, um, I went to college. I evolved into a calling of ministry. Kathy and I married in 73. We moved to Dallas in 76 to found a church from nothing, green as we could be. We pastored that church 40 years. And during that time, there were lots of hills and valleys. And during that time, I guess I was a slow learner, but it took me a long time to get to the place of the understanding that we have now developed through this book of what real happiness is like. I was pastoring a church and doing all I knew to do right, and I wasn't that happy. I felt guilty about it because I had every reason to be happy. I have an unbelievably great wife, two great kids, a growing church, tons of friends, lots of reason, good health, lots of reasons to be really happy. I don't know how much of it was DNA, background, upbringing, just me. I don't have anybody to blame for anything. I just have to say that I wasn't as naturally as happy a person as I wish I had been.
Hmm.
So
That's
it was a shock to me when I was sitting on the Mount of Beatitudes in Israel 10 years ago, and I had finished teaching a group of about 100 pilgrims that I took there on the Beatitudes. And I felt this impression at the end of it to write a book on this subject because, as we'll learn in this interview, blessed are was language changed from a word for happy. Blissfully filled with joy are those who. And then Jesus gives us 8 pathways to that in every kind of difficult life situation. And I almost laughed when I felt the impression to write a book on happiness because I'm like, you got the wrong guy. Uh, in fact, I heard recently some of our college friends were standing around at a conference. I wasn't there. And one of them said, "Hey guys, did you hear Mike Hayes wrote a book that's just been released on happiness?" And my friend that was telling me said, "We all died laughing."
Oh, that's so funny. So your reputation obviously was not one of being bubbled over with joy at any given moment. So yeah, that's
No,
funny.
I think if you ask them, I think if it had to be one word, they would probably say I was intense, but probably not happy.
Mm.
I wasn't known as a bubbly. Now, Kathy, my wife, is, and so she made up for it. But thank God I am where I am. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm a slow learner.
Some of us are, Mike, just the way it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so happiness, joy. Uh, is there a difference? How do you see a difference between happiness and joy, if there is one?
Jeff?
Yeah, I think there is, I mean, there is a difference, the etymology between the two words, especially if we're reading it from the Greek text, which the New Testament is written in Greek. If we're reading both of those words from Greek into reading back into the Greek, there is a difference between the two. Joy tends to be in Greek, it tends to be more of the emotional kind of the like rejoice, like there's an emotion that's associated with joy. Makarios tends to be, sometimes we think of it as the good life, or we think of it as Mike has mentioned here, as blissful, but it's something that's rooted in a spirituality. Like you can rejoice in the fact that you accomplish something or you win something, or and scriptures, address us putting our joy in God. But happiness was rooted, it's a spiritual reality that's rooted in this in a spiritual reality. So Makarios, we first hear it with Socrates as kind of the first one that takes the classical philosophers in Greece. They were just bantering about random ideas, and Socrates grabs this idea and makes philosophy serve this agenda of happiness and starts having discussions about Makarios. And it's not just Socrates, but it's Plato and it's Aristotle, and they all talk about the happy life, the life of Makarios, and they go on and on. Many of them are connecting it to virtue, but all of them at the end of the day will say to us that it's unattainable, that it's reserved for the gods. It's something we can talk about, but by and large, fate determines whether or not we are happy. And fate is against, it's a determined thing whether or not you'll be happy. And when Jesus steps up on that hillside that Mike's referring to here, and he opens up his first sermon, his first speech, and delivers his word, it's said in juxtaposition with Moses going up on his mountain, and he's giving 10 commands. But when Jesus goes up on his mountain, it are these 8 oracles of happiness that he begins with. And it's jarring because for his world, especially, he's talking to blue collar workers, he's talking to Galileans, fishermen, stonemasons, olive grove workers. He's talking to just ordinary middle class people. And he's saying, you are happy, poor in spirit, pure in heart, meek. And then he kind of lays out this, what Mike and I have called kind of this pathway to happiness that's for ordinary people. And it's almost like he's redistributing what Socrates and Plato and Aristotle had said was only for the Greek pantheon. He is redistributing that to common folk, but to folk of a certain demeanor, of a certain perspective, the poor in spirit, those who mourn. And what's so fascinating is he takes those things that we typically associate with sadness, with the pitiful life, the bad life, the ugly life, poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who hunger and thirst, those that are meek. He takes the language and grammar associated that we typically associate with kind of the negative, and he spins it, flips it on its head, and says, no, the happy life is something that God has for all of you. And it doesn't matter where you find yourself. If you're sad, you still can have the happy life. If you're going through grief and sorrow, you still can have the happy life. If you're poor in spirit, you still can have the happy life. And he just walks through all of this. And by the time you get to the end of it, it's almost like the way that I like to think about it is it's almost like he's opening up the curtain to the kingdom of heaven and giving us a peek inside of what heaven's like. And at the same time, he's giving an oracle. He's breathing a prophetic word over us as humans that is about happiness. And as Mike mentioned a moment ago, for whatever reason, the translators, when they were translating from Greek to English, going all the way back to King James, the King James Version, they just felt that happy was too shallow. And so they're like, we have a Greek word for blessed. We have a completely different word for blessed. And that's not the word that Jesus uses, but they're uncomfortable with the word happy. And so they grab the word blessed to try to make it more sanctimonious or more sacred or something. And, Mike has said this before, but I think it's almost like the feeling that I get when someone says blessed is it's almost kind of a holy, it's like something you say over a meal, a blessing you say over a meal, or it's, we kind of see it as being something way out there, kind of, and happy we think is just frivolous. And yet that's the word Jesus chooses to use. And I think it's because it's something that we long for. It's part of our human longing to be happy, to enjoy life. We long for that. And for whatever reason, we feel like that's the furthest thing that God has for us. That life has to be grueling, difficult, laborious, full of a ton of suffering, and that we're just pitiful creatures all the time. And yet, when Jesus has his first experience in the waters of baptism, there is this booming voice from heaven that says, "This is my son. I love him. He brings me great joy." It is a stark contrast to the prophetic voices of doom, to what people have pictured as God or the gods being, that they're hateful, that they're, remote, that they're too distant from us. And now we have this familial, this paternal voice of love and of joy celebrating the life of his son in the waters of baptism. And by the way, this is before Jesus has ever done one miracle, performed one act of ministry. All he has done is shown up and got in the waters. As Luke says, when the people were getting baptized, Jesus got baptized too. He's just joining in what it means to be human under the voice of John the Baptist. And the Father's booming with, the picture I have is like the buttons of the sky bursting wide open of Father's pride over his son, just exclaiming, "That's my boy, that's my boy. I love him, and I am so happy." And I think it's that message that Jesus takes from that moment in those waters, and he is in fidelity to that word his entire life, all the way to the cross. When people are saying, "If you are the Son of God, come down." He, from that moment all the way to the end, he holds on to that word and will not let go of it and lives a life that all of us are envious of. Even though he didn't get one degree, he doesn't own a mansion, but he lives the kind of life that we know that is really the happy life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so incredible. I love all this, by the way, because I love when you look back and you get the original text and you get the true meaning of something instead of something that we've twisted and turned throughout the years. And that God was so happy with his son. I love the picture of the buttons just bursting open with that pride, and so proud of his son and happy. And I feel like sometimes people, I don't know if it's like they like they like to not be happy or need
Mm.
permission to be happy. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, and Mike was speaking to this a moment ago, but I think we feel guilty for being happy sometimes. Like if we're too happy, our world is wants to celebrate more of the victim, being the victim, and we get caught up somehow in this, caught in this. It's like my daughter said to me, she was in a class in college, and she said, at one point she goes, everyone's going around the room and everyone's trying to outdo themselves with a pitiful story. And she said, at one point, I'm going, man, I had a great life growing up. I had things were going well, but I feel like to be accepted, I have to come up with a story of how bad things are. And that's just not the case. She goes, and Dad, what do you do when everyone's just trying to outdo each other with how pitiful their life is?
Yeah. What do you do? Yeah, and then you're the only voice going, I had a great life as they're
Yeah.
talking about their woes and struggles. But I think though too, tell me this, because you guys are the absolute experts on happiness. Uh, Happiness can be found, like you said, in mourning. Anything that you're going through in life, you can still be happy. You can still be in that state and be living the happy life. And so it's interesting to me how people tell their own story or perceive things however they want to, and through a lens of happiness, way different than through a lens of what was me. Right? So you had a bunch of
Yeah, I'd like to, if
yeah.
I could insert, here's something that we learned and that Jeff, he so beautifully opened the story of Jesus' baptism. Kim, when Jesus was baptized and the Father spoke over him, that was the announcement of the end of striving to please an unhappy God. And if I could say so, in studying comparative religions, all the major religions in the world, and unfortunately, because of the human condition that has crept into Christianity as well, Every major religion in the world is all about man's striving to please a reluctant and angry God. If somehow I can deserve his kindness and he won't destroy me or squash me like a bug, what do I need to do? I've seen people in Asia who were starving themselves and crawling across a sidewalk to reach a stone idol to place in its outstretched hands a banana or a pineapple or something they could give as an offering to try to appease a God that was not pleased with them. Every religion features striving because it's a human created emotion. And when the Father says, I like you just like you are, you haven't done anything spectacular yet, but you will, and I'm going to be right there with you. Happiness is not possible in an atmosphere of striving. You have to choose one or the other. And one of the reasons that I thought God needed to choose someone else for me, other than me, to write a book on happiness is because I had not understood or conquered this feeling of needing to be good enough. And I wasn't sure if God was pleased with me. If I'd been doing a lot of good things, I was probably okay. If I hadn't been doing as much, maybe I wasn't. And here I am trying to pastor and build a church to lead people into faith. And I didn't know half of the time where I stood because I was striving. And it's so natural to us to feel unworthy. And look, I can settle this argument right now. I'm not. None of us are worthy of the sacrifice and the offering of his life that has been given for us. That's what Christianity is about. And by the way, Christianity is the only spiritual experience that you can follow in the world and become a Christ follower that offers a forgiveness life, a start over life, a grace life, a turn the new page life, or maybe even get a whole new book life. It's the only religion in the world where we actually, and that's why the gospel is called the good news, Kim, because you can resign from trying to be the general manager of the universe and leave it to him and enjoy your life. A great rabbi a few years ago was at the end of his life as an old man, and they gathered around his bed, and he was dropping various nuggets of wisdom. And he said to them, I feel like when I face God at the judgment, he's not going to talk to me about the mistakes or sins that I may have committed. I think he's going to ask me, did you enjoy all that I gave you? And that was so convicting to me because it gave me a different picture. Because God has given us so much. And my job is not to figure out how to navigate my wormly self into a position somehow where God will be happy with me, but in fact, to enjoy the life that He has blessed me with. And that's where worship and adoration and praise and all that is holy comes in. So I'll finish my comment here with this, Kim, and I know we need to move on. But your question was the difference in joy and happiness. Jeff explained that beautifully. But here's one interesting point. What we learned in our research is because some of the first criticisms we got of the book from the religious is online, people would say things like this. I don't think God is concerned about us being happy. I think he wants us to be holy. And my response was, why are those two things mutually exclusive? You can't be holy or pleasing to him and be happy too. And the truth is, most people that are talking about that don't feel holy. They're trying to be holy. And yet the scripture teaches us that we'll never be holy enough not to need to live vicariously through the sacrificed life of Jesus. And he who knew no sin became sin for us that we might be the righteousness of God in Christ. That makes me really happy. So I'm not striving to try to be holy enough to please him. I'm dwelling in a happy place. And here's the thing, Kim, we learned that 20 centuries ago, when Jesus was teaching this, joy and happiness in our society have been flipped over from how they were used in Jesus' day. In Jesus' day, joy was an emotion that could come and go. Happiness was a reality that was deep seated through any circumstance. And we have in our society almost flipped those words. People think happiness is flippant and joy is the real deal. But that's not the way it was 20 centuries ago. Happiness is a real thing. It's deep and abiding and in spite of your circumstance. And if I can jump forward into one of the Beatitudes that most changed me personally, I think, is the one that says, happy are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And I didn't like that when growing up or quoting even into my adult time, ministry time, because I equated meekness with weakness. And I didn't want to confess that about Jesus or myself. I didn't see him as weak, and I didn't want to be weak. Then, when I understood the true meaning of the English word meek, it means strength under control. It was first used when the Romans started developing war horses out of Spain, and they developed this majestic horse that could carry its armored rider into battle and not spook at the sights and sounds and terror of war, but stay under control. And that's where they first started using meekness. Meekness is self-control in the toughest of circumstance. And Jesus said, if you want to be really happy, you got to be strong but under control. It's not possible to be out of control and full of anger all the time over something and be happy at the same time. Your strength has to be controlled. And when you control your strength, you inherit what you used to try to merit. And that's the big difference. Every one of these Beatitudes opened up like a flower into something so beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is so powerful. I love hearing that. It's true. And I used to look at me like that as well. Like, does it mean I need to be quieter?
Yeah,
Like,
kind of pitiful. It was a synonym for pitiful.
right, exactly. And who wants to be pitiful? Like,
Yeah.
don't want that. So I'm so happy to know that. And it is so interesting to me that happiness it's really a way of life, where it's something that you do. It's active and it's alive within you, right? And so would you say then too that makes it a choice?
It does. And happiness is absolutely a choice. Now, all of the good things God intends come rushing in when we choose that. But it is within our power to choose. I know people who have chosen because maybe they want to nurse their offense, maybe they want to refuse to forgive. There's a million reasons. But just like we can choose to be unhappy, we can choose to find happiness.
So interesting that you would say choose to be unhappy, because that's what it would mean. If you can choose to be happy, then obviously, if you're living unhappy, it's because you're choosing that.
Absolutely. That's why we hear some of the most inspiring stories of humans that we all like to hear, of people with severe difficulties and setbacks and handicaps, and they overcome and are filled with joy. And then there are those of us that have so much going for us, and we're miserable. And the more we get and the more we gather, and this is a good entree for us to talk about really the first beatitude, and Jeff can fill us in on that. But the very first one, which really needs an accurate first century translation, the first beatitude says in English, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And everything has evolved out of that, from religious vows of poverty to other things that really adjust our lives. But when you look at the original translation, it has everything to do with making an emptiness that he can fill. Because the more we strive for happiness with temporal things, the more we fill the space with toys and relationships and houses and education and degrees, and the less room there is for the spirit of happiness. So sometimes we have to start the process of happiness by emptying out the junk. So we actually give people very practical advice and tell them on this journey to happiness, because we have a whole 12-week course that Jeff and I teach on this live and in person and online. And we have a mini course now that we've reduced it down to 3 sessions that's available online that we could tell you about at the end. But in that, we start the process in a very practical way with emptying out, creating a void place that God can fill. So we tell people, if you're a lady, this seems to fit the women better and the garage fits the men. Ladies, go to your closet, clean it out and organize it, and give half the stuff in there away, because everyone knows you don't wear half of what's in there. So clean it out. And there's actually a high that comes from cleaning out your closet, organizing it, giving stuff to a mercy ministry or something of people that need it. And to the guys, we say, take a Saturday, get out there and clean your garage. Look at what we do, Kim. We fill the closet, we fill the garage, we fill the attic, and then we go and rent a storage space and we start filling that with stuff. And we haven't been even to see it for 3 years, but we're paying $200 a month to store stuff that we obviously don't need. We haven't used any of it in years. And there's a high that comes from cleaning out and creating empty space where you've had it packed with who knows what physically, because it kind of sets the tone for emotionally and spiritually. And then we teach people how to clean that out, clean those old emotions out, clean those old conversations that you nursed and rehearsed and cursed over and over. Get rid of that stuff and choose to be happy. And there is material enough to fill your heart with new experiences and new emotions and new joy.
That's so good. That is so good. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I probably wear half the clothes in my closet or less. And there is a real joy in emptying out.
Yeah.
The joy in giving away, but also the joy of just having open spaces. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so wonderful to just go out in nature and be in big, wide open spaces and breathe air that's not been stifled by a room, and just be out in God's glory. And
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense that you clean out spaces in your house, you figure out how to clean out spaces in yourself and
Yeah.
get some of that baggage put away so that there is room. So so you talked about the physical, clean the garage, clean the closet. What about the spiritual? What about the emptying of the inside, so to make room for God?
Yeah, I think we're kind of fed this line that a filled life is a fulfilled life, right? Like we equate filling things up with fulfilling our life. And Jesus, you know, turns that right side up and says, actually, a filled life is not a fulfilled life, that it's the empty places, the poor in spirit. And then he gives 3 practical movements, handles to live that out in the next chapter on the same sermon. In the same sermon, But in chapter 6 of Matthew, he says, when you pray, when you fast, and when you give. So we've kind of talked about what Mike's talked about here is that giving part, going in and making room in your closet, making room in your garage, giving some things away and making room for joy to fill where all that clutter was. But then he talks about, giving away time, and giving away, like in fasting, giving away things that we've become very dependent on, and we look to that to sustain us. Like opening up space even there. So it talks about fasting. So you can fast from social media. You could fast from entertainment. You can you can go down a list of things that we tend to just, especially with an iPhone today, we tend to just kind of, get glued to it, scrolling through social media or whatever, and it occupies so much of our time. We're going from one dopamine hit to another. But if we would push away from that and just create margin in our life and open ourselves up to facing God with that margin, we would discover a deeper reality is present with us all the time. But we're so preoccupied that we can't even occupy a space with God because we're preoccupied. And then he talks about prayer. And I think, one of the things that I would encourage people to do is start with some form every morning or every evening of giving some margin to God in prayer. And that could be as simple as moments of silence, reading scripture, um, a short, simple 5-minute prayer, or a 1 minute, or for crying out loud, a 5-second prayer. Start with that. Hi, Lord, it's me. I don't know what to say. Bye. But I think just the energy of putting your attention on something other than yourself, on God, and acknowledging God has a way of working out all the wrinkles. It starts working out all the wrinkles in our life. And eventually, you get to a point where you're like, I'm getting so much joy from this time, this spiritual time that I'm giving to God, this time in serving at a local mercy ministry, or I'm getting so much joy from that, that the things that I used to absorb myself with, self-absorbing things I used to do, they don't fulfill me. I realize, and they never were really fulfilling me anyway. That was an illusion. And so I'm kind of freed up to live from this deep reservoir, this spiritual existence that's happening inside of me. I'm able to connect with that and live in that. So I encourage people to pray or meditate or find something other than just, being so caught up in the news cycle or the gossip, what's going on in the next door neighbor app, or what's, all of those things that we kind of get all worked up emotionally over, and we really have no control over them anyway. But put yourself in a place. And I think those three things, the one that Mike has talked about, of giving something away, which Jesus says alms, when you give, when you pray, and when you fast, giving stuff up, time, space, and material. And when you do that, it makes room, especially if you're orienting yourself around God. It makes room for the joy that's always been there all along. You just couldn't see it because you were so fixated on the joyless things of life.
That is so good. That is so good, and absolutely 100% practical, and 100% what Jesus tells us to do. So somehow Jesus is practical. Isn't that crazy? And I love that it really is that simple. And when you give of yourself, one thing that I found in life is that you just can't outgive God. You just can't, whether you're giving alms, giving things, whether you're giving time, whether you're, no matter what it is, whether you're fasting, you can't outgive God. I remember the first time I was going to go on a mission trip to the Dominican Republic, and I thought, I'm going there to serve. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to work hard. I'm going there to serve. And man, I came home with so much more than what I went there with. And I wasn't close because I left those there, but I came home with so much more than I ever could pour out. And God is just really cool that way. And so happiness, I would imagine, because it's from God, that works the same way. Like you can't out happy God.
I love that. You can't out happy God, or as we would say, hallelujah.
Hallelujah. I like that. That should be in a song somewhere. You're gonna have to write that. But
Right, right.
yeah, it's really good. Tell me, so Mike, you went through this transition in your life where happy wasn't part of your daily bread, your daily living, and then you come to this revelation. And how different is your life now when you realize happiness is a choice, you choose it and you own it and it becomes who you are? How different is life now compared to before?
Well, it's hugely different for me, Kim, and one of the reasons is that in the Sermon on the Mount, which, as Jeff mentioned, is Jesus' first diatribe, first sermon, um, the first half of it contains the Beatitudes. The second half of it, he begins to instruct what the opposite of happy is and the necessity of defeating that. And oddly enough, uh, the opposite of happy is not unhappy. The opposite of happy, according to Jesus' teaching, is worry. So it's not possible to be really happy and worry at the same time. So in the second half of the sermon, Jesus attacks worry. And the book, I've got one here. I'm going to hold this up. This happens to be the Spanish version, but you see the poppy on the front? The reason that red poppy is there is because when we were sitting on the hillside teaching this, it was in the spring and the hillside was filled with these red poppies. And Jeff and I learned that the word used in the original language is the poppy flower. Somewhere, I think in the 1500s or so in the translation, they changed it to lily. So we know that famous verse where Jesus says, consider the lily. Uh, they didn't have lilies in Galilee, they had poppies, and that's the word. It doesn't make a major change in the text, but we put this poppy on there because, first place, it just sounds like a happy flower to me. It sounds like a happier flower than a lily. Lilies are for funerals, poppies are for happy. And so when Jesus attacks worry, here's how he does it. He says, look around you, consider all of these poppy flowers. They're not working or laboring, and yet they're so beautiful that in all of Solomon's glory, he was never dressed as beautifully as them. And they didn't get like this because they worried about getting this way. So then Jesus gets really almost cynically practical, and he says, because the answers are obvious. He says to them, how many of you can add 1 inch to your height by worrying? How many of you can pay bills because you worry? How many of you feel like you'll be better dressed because you worry? And the answer to all those is you can't. You don't make any of that better by worrying. So he says, then how do you defeat worry? Well, look at the poppies. Consider that if our Father takes care of them and they're covering this hillside in beautiful bloom, how much more will he care for you? So happiness is put over against worry. And one of the reasons my life is hugely different and better is because I probably called it deep contemplative thought that's akin to genius, but it's actually what Kathy calls, she came off of a ranch and she was a ranch girl, and she calls it stirring in a pot. What are you doing, Mike? Stirring in a pot? And what that means is, how long are you going to ruminate this same thing and it's not going to get better by worrying about it more? So you got to put worry, and that's another choice, Kim. you got to choose. I'm not going to worry. I choose to be happy, because happiness is the antidote to worry, because you can't do both. So I've got to decide, am I going to worry about this, or am I going to trust the Father and I'm going to be happy in spite of this? That's how he covered in the Beatitudes such difficult things as, happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And I got the full experience of that just over a year ago. I lost my sister, 2 years younger than me, to pancreatic cancer, and it was such a difficult thing. Jenny and I were close, and I was in the middle of this book, and this beatitude became really real to me, because I have to tell you, Kim, I walked through this difficult place of losing my sister to this horrible disease, but I never lost my happiness. It doesn't mean I was jumping up and down, clapping my hands and laughing hilariously, but there was a deep, settled joy that it didn't rattle me like it would have, because I couldn't fix her by worrying about her, but I could maintain happiness because of my trust that God was in charge. Now, I don't know how to better explain that, because it almost seems sacrilegious. But no, here's what's really sacrilegious is, in Bible times, Jesus came to pray for the girl, you remember, who before he got there had passed away. And he took Peter, James, and John with him, and he said, let's go in the room to the parents, show us where she is. And the Bible says that he drove out the mourners, because in those days, people were very emotional. Middle Eastern people are emotional, and they hired mourners to come and wail and weep and slap their thigh and put veils over their face and cry. But that doesn't fix anything about the situation, and it's not even the best choice or sincere. So he said, look, if we're going to fill this room with life and a miracle's going to happen here, away with this fake mourning, and let's get down to the business of bringing life. Now, I'm not Jesus, but I can choose to not allow the most difficult of circumstance in my life steal my joy, because the opposite of that is worry. And what am I going to fix by worrying? So I'm going to choose to be happy.
That's so good.
And since COVID, Kim, as all of us walk through difficult times, since COVID, it's been the most difficult, maybe 5 years in Kathy and I's life. Uh, I turned our church that we spent 40 years building to my son. The younger generation took over. He did great for 3 years. And then he wasn't processing his problems and worries properly. And he hit a wall and crashed, and he had to resign and step down. And I put a young man in that's been just a son in the gospel to me. And Ricky pastored 1 year, 56 years old, picture of health, and in 10 days caught COVID and died.
Mm.
Then my daughter, who's a fantastic author and teacher, spiritual leader, she had come up with her second bout with breast cancer, and it was stage 4. And she was in treatment. And the world was really dark.
Mm.
But Amy began to rebound. She said to me, Dad, what you're doing is important. You're writing, you're publishing, you're speaking at a different level. You're not a local pastor now, and you can't go backward. If you trust me until something different happens, I'm willing to step up and pastor this church. I've been here all my life. So she stepped up. We set her in. When that happened, her tumor markers, for those who know those numbers, the average person walks around with a tumor number of 34. Hers were over 2,000. And her tests last month and scans showed that her tumor markers are 27. She's lower than the average person walking around that's never had cancer. And she's doing a great job leading that ministry. Now, the sun is shining again, but that doesn't mean there aren't difficult times in our life. What I want us to get across, and I want Jeff to share his heart on this, Kim, is this is, as opposed to what I thought going into this happiness thing is not flippant. It's not silly. It's not unimportant to God. It is attainable, and it is a great way to live.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Jeffrey?
Yeah, everything that Mike's saying, of course, resonates deeply with me. And we both feel like God put us together for a reason because we have such a similar heart on this. And while he was talking, the words that kept kind of, that I was processing through as he was sharing what he was just now sharing, because what he walked through is a very real thing. We are not in any way saying that this is a mind over matter, that happiness is just something you kind of think your way over, and everything's going to be um, beautiful, and we're going to be all dancing on the tulips or whatever. What Jesus offers is not happiness in the absence of difficulty. He is offering us something far more provocative: happiness through difficulty, that it will actually come through it. As Christians, we celebrate the resurrection, but the resurrection was not just Jesus lived to be a good ripe old age of 80, and they buried him, and people cried, and that was kind of sad. And then 3 days later, he jumped up. It came through a cross, a horrific, terrorizing, traumatizing moment for all of his followers, and yet through that came the most joyful, beautiful, and I think that's what we're saying here. And I have my own story of which happened just prior to the pandemic, of going through a very difficult divorce, and at one point wondering if taking my own life was the answer, you know. But coming through that season to where I am today and recognizing that I'm far more happy. I'm happier today. I'm more joyful today. I'm more grounded today. My life has actually been kind of tested, and and as I mean, I don't even know how it sounds, but I know it's my truth. I wouldn't change any of that. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I feel like I'm more substantive than I was before. And it grieves me. I'm heavy in my heart, you know. But if I had to do it all over again, I would let that thing just play out like it did. And I think it's coming back to this idea that what Jesus offers us is not pie in the sky, but it's joy in clay feet on a muddy road. That's what it is. And it's far more real than what the world or what our context around us tries to portray as what the happy life is that we see on social media. It's having this car, or going on this vacation, or accomplishing this or that, and that's much more fleeting and shallow than what Jesus offers us.
Man, that is so good. Everything you guys have said is just so good. It's just so true. It's certainly not talked about nearly enough, I don't believe. And I love hearing that the opposite of happy is worry, because worry does get you nowhere, unless you like ulcers, I guess, or something. Otherwise, it doesn't do you any good. You're not going to grow in it. And so worry, and the Bible talks about that in more than one place, to not worry. It's kind of not our job to worry. Like there's not a reason. There's no productive thing at all about worry. It's the opposite. It's destructive. And so that being the absolute opposite of happy, makes happy to me just so much deeper and so much richer, because worry can be gigantic, right?
Yeah,
So the opposite of that must also be just huge.
yeah. This is what we've all got to think like. Uh, the scriptures say, unless you become as little children, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And Kathy and I are enjoying 3 great grandchildren this year that were born to my daughter's kids that had cancer. She had prayed, Lord, let me live long enough to see my daughter marry. And she not only saw her marry, but her other 2 sons, and now she has 3 grandbabies. And that's 3 great grands for us. But part of the joy, isn't it, of watching babies and toddlers play? I had them over here, Kathy and I did at the house the other night, and they're such a delight. And you know what? How little they know. They're playing and they're full of joy and they're teasing one another and they're sharing toys and they're doing what toddlers do. They don't know anything about their parents' bank account. They don't know anything about the pantry. They don't know if we're broke. They don't know if we have insurance. They don't know what the last doctor's visit told us. They don't know anything, but they trust. Naturally, they trust that mom and dad are here for me and I'm okay. I'm not, I don't think they've had one worry in their life except where is my next bottle or breast coming from? That's the only worry that they have. And
If that was a worry, that might not even have been a worry, just a want, right?
that's right. It's a what? So here's a question for our audience, Kim, because all of us get stuck in the I'll be happy when. I want to ask our audience a question. What do you feel like needs to happen in your life? What needs to happen for you to be happy? And are you stuck in the I will be happy when? Because here's the danger of that. You may have some obstacle right now that's got you unhappy or worried, but if you don't deal with that now and you get locked into the I'll be happy when, then you're going to spend your whole life jumping from one issue to the next and enjoy very little happiness. Because Kathy's mantra, her saying is, I got to make sure. My saying is, it's always something. So Kathy feels like hers is a lot more positive than mine. But you know what? That's the way life looks to me. It's always something. So if I'm going to get caught in this, I'm going to be happy when this happens, then I'm going to spend my whole life unhappy, because as soon as this happens and it's over and I'm momentarily happy, then something else happens. So that's a dangerous place, that I'll be happy when. So what I want us to do, and your audience to do today, it's such a joy to be with you, Kim. You're a delightful person. And I just want to ask all who view and are listening, what are you waiting on to be really happy? What has to change? Is it when you have kids? Is it when you get the kids raised? Is it when you get the kids through college? Is it when your kids give you grandchildren? Is it, what are you going to do with your life? And you're going to look up and be slobbering on yourself in a nursing home somewhere, still saying, I'm going to be happy when they bring me my tray of rubber chicken and jello. Then I'm going to be happy. And you're going to spend your whole life not ever really being happy. I'm going to choose it today because, and I totally agree with what Jeff said a minute ago, but I do like this saying too. It's easier to act your way into a feeling than it is to feel your way into an action. And so that means that if you really want to be happy, start acting like you want to be today, rather than sitting around waiting for whatever you think happiness is to hit you, and then you'll be happy. It's easier to act your way into a feeling than to feel your way into an action. By the way, every successful marriage needs to have that in their constitution and bylaws.
Mhm.
Because you're not going to wake up every morning of your life. Kathy and I have been together 53 years. You're not going to wake up every morning feeling like you're on a honeymoon. Sometimes you're going through really tough places. And in 53 years, we've known every feeling, every high, every low, and every temptation. And it's easier for me to act my way into a feeling than to feel my way into an action. See, if I'm trying to feel my way into getting Kathy to respond to me properly, I can hit the door at the end of the day and say, hey, where's the dinner? And it better be good. And I know since you love me so much, you've got all this fixed for me. And then I'm going to feel warm and fuzzy about our love. This is another truth I want to give you, Kim, that I learned that's really helped. But behavioral scientists tell us that your first 3 minutes in coming into an environment sets the tone for the whole rest of the day or night. So when I come through the door back from work and my wife is home, if that's the scenario, my treatment toward her the first 3 minutes is going to set the tone for the happiness in our home for the rest of the night.
Mhm.
Because I can make such a mess in the first 3 minutes because of my worries and my troubles and what I want to take out on somebody else, but I take it out on her and ruin the whole night. And by the time it's time to go to bed, I'm apologizing and she's crying and I promise I'll never do that again. That can all be avoided by choosing to be happy and saying, look, I'm so glad that you're here, that you're healthy. I won't go into detail about this too much, but I am so happy with that because Kathy, 2.5 months ago, suffered a fall in our home. She was moving a vase off of the mantle and it was heavier than she thought, and she fell out of the chair she was standing in and she broke her femur, and it was a compound fracture and she almost bled out. 5 more minutes, she would have been dead. Now she's 2.5 months into it. Her leg is healing. She lost so much blood, it caused a stroke, and she suffered aphasia, which means she's having a hard time finding her words. And she's studying like a child every day how to talk again, and she's getting better and better. She's going to be 100% back. But in the middle of that, you think I'm going to walk into this house with my little old petty something about a traffic jam and not be grateful that she's alive?
Mhm.
There's always something to be thankful for
Mhm.
and happy about.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, man. I'm so sorry that she went through that. That poor woman. What a thing. But how incredible that you both have these
Yeah.
attitudes and that
Yeah.
you're going to be happy
Oh,
through it all. You're going to be happy. And you guys, both of you have just given so much gold to my audience today. I am so grateful. Like everything that you've had to say is just, man, I think people are going to have to listen to this over and over again to get everything that you gave. I am so grateful for you guys. I'm so grateful for this book that, by the way, buy it, get the book. It's on Amazon. It's available. Send the book. Don't just buy one copy, buy a few copies, hand them out. This is a book that is for everybody because happiness is for everybody. Living the happy life is for everybody. So, and Amazon makes it so easy. Like you don't have to go to the store and buy it and package it up and send it and pay the postage. All you got to do is order the book online, plug in the address, and away it goes. And what a
yeah.
wonderful thing to send happy to people. What a gift to
Yeah.
send them happy. Why wouldn't you? So buy a copy for yourself, buy a bunch for others, send them to family and friends, send this episode on, let other people understand this happy that you get to choose, that we get to choose. And what a privilege it is to be able to choose that. So thank you guys so much for being here today. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for all that you're doing to change the world, make it a better place. And thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you being here. And I just pray that until we see each other again, that you keep your heart open, and you live your love loud.